Hi, everyone. Welcome back to IAGB Youth Talk. This is Supriya Shekhar, one of the directors at IAGB, and I also lead the IAGB youth community. It's my pleasure to bring in another topic. This time, it's another controversial topic, which is climate change. At IAGB Youth Talk, we bring in topics that are concerning or exciting to the youth community and get their viewpoints. So, without further delay, let's get started. I would now like to ask Nakul Ramesh to introduce the panelist, and let's get started. Nakul, over
Thank
to
you.
you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nakul Ramesh, and I'm a member of the Youth Committee. Today, we have three panelists for you, along with a special guest. Our panelists' names are Shurya Gupta, Nipun Goel, and Sarana Chan. Shurya is a junior at Thayer Academy in Braintree. He enjoys chess and wants to go into neuroscience. Nipun is also a junior at Franklin High School. He plays football, the trumpet, and is on his school's mock trial team. Sarna is an 8th grader at Brown Middle School. She's an avid baker who also likes to sing and debate. Our guest speaker is Mr. Adam Fishman. He's the founder of Honora. Honora is an organization that helps us become more aware of our impact on our planet and what we can do to reduce our ripple effect. So far, they have saved over 15 million pounds of greenhouse gases from our environment. By making climate conscious education and planet healing action easily accessible to everyone, Honora is helping us have a cleaner planet. With that, over to you, Shoria.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We're all excited to get our second youth podcast underway. As Sabriya said, today's topic is climate change, and this has been a pretty controversial topic over the past couple of years, especially with the previous presidency creating so much speculation around it. I'm excited to get into it. Adam, you want to introduce a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk with everyone and learn too, because I'm learning from you, you learn from me, and it's going to be fun. I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for 2 years ago having my call it climate wake up call. And it was actually from Greta Thunberg, which many of you may know, but at the time she was 16 years old. And, what woke me, I'll tell you what woke me up, but at the time, I had just graduated from Dartmouth College and was doing marketing strategy consulting for 4 years in Boston. And I had actually decided to leave my job to focus on building a non-climate related business venture. And I'm scrolling through Facebook videos one day, and I'm not kidding you. I stumble upon a video of Greta speaking to the British government about the state of the planet. And for the first time, I have this feeling in my gut of we need to do something now. Why, and yeah. And so I decided in that moment that this other problem that I was trying to solve, great, I can solve it later. If someone else solves it, great. But this problem needs my full attention. And so, with my marketing mindset, with this wake up call is having two big questions I was asking. One, why am I just now starting to care about this? Why is this not something that I'd been thinking about all the time beforehand? But then also, what can I realistically do about this? Luckily I was old enough to vote at the time, but it felt like my options were either to wait 4 years to vote or not use plastic straws. And neither of which felt like they'd have the impact in the time they needed. And so kind of it set me on this path to, help me help other people wake up, because I know there's so many other people like me with good intentions. It's not like I was walking around saying I hate the planet. I just didn't know. And becoming more aware of this and learning how to do my part is kind of the journey that Greta set me on, and the ripple effect that she created in my life. And it led to me creating Honora and led to us having this conversation here. And excited to chat more with you guys about it.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we've come a long way in the past, decade with, awareness being created around climate change and people starting to do stuff. As Adam mentioned, he, started Honora in attempt to, solve climate change. We can just jump right in. We can start with the topic of greenhouse gases and why they are today's problem.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that too to kick us off, because for the last 2 years, I've basically been thinking about climate change more or less nonstop, and whether it's studying, researching, reflecting, talking with experts, that's pretty much all I've been doing. So I'm not a climate scientist. We'll say that right here and there. So if we want to get into the super technical stuff, we'll stay pretty general here, but along the way, I've learned something pretty critical about our greenhouse gas problem that I think would be helpful to share. And it's actually that what I've learned is that what most people call the problem around greenhouse gas is actually a symptom of a larger root problem that we need to solve. And so, there's this war on greenhouse gas going on right now, which I fully subscribe to as well, because, what's happening is the temperature of the planet is rising, which is creating a number of ripple effects in all forms of the planet. And if we look at what is causing that rise in temperature, it's the concentration of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. And greenhouse gas are things like carbon dioxide, methane, and carbon dioxide is really the biggie here. And that's something that is a byproduct of burning fossil fuels. And so by nature of the way we make the things we use in our society, we happen to burn a lot of greenhouse gas in the process. And unfortunately, in the last 50 years, we've skyrocketed the amount of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. It's now over 130 times higher than it's ever been in human history. So in 800,000 years, we've done in like 50, 60 years, skyrocketed it by the way that we've learned. We learned some really cool things. We're talking on technology right now that allows us to talk all around the world, but we've created a lot of things that also have these ripple effects. And it is a big problem. But I'll also add that I've come to learn that it's a symptom. So in complex problem solving, this is something in engineering and in general, in complex problem solving, there's a phrase that's used called reframing the problem. And especially with extra wicked problems like climate change, it's critical that we're looking at this from different points of view to make sure that we're actually asking the right questions and make sure that we're actually solving the right problem. And so along the way, I've learned that we actually, the problem that we need to solve is what I call a disconnection problem. And what I mean by that is that we as a society have become very disconnected from the things that from the goods and services and foods that we use and buy and enjoy in our lives. But we because we are unaware of the impact those are having, we don't see the impact they're having on people on the planet. And because of this disconnection, yes, we end up having massive amounts of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, boiling the planet. But what we also end up having is massive amounts of plastic in the ocean. We end up having using pesticides to grow our food and killing the soil. So there's all these different issues. And I used to think that these were all different issues. I used to think it was greenhouse gas. That's it. We're in this war on greenhouse gas. Solve that problem, we fix everything. But the more I've learned, the more I realize that it's this disconnection problem that at its core we need to solve. And greenhouse gas is just one of the many presenting symptoms of that core problem.
Yeah, it's a great point you make. I feel like a lot of us are definitely disconnected from all the things that we have, a computer, a desk. It's very likely that those have come from production areas that release more gases. Nipun?
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, Sharia. This disconnection problem, I fall victim to it. I think you guys fall victim to it too. Like, when's the last time you stop and you go into a store, pick up a candy bar, and you don't realize that the chocolate that's come from it has been, used using on not great source materials or exploited labor. So I think we also need to focus on that for the climate industry. And what you said about greenhouse gases, I thought the exact same thing. The greenhouse gases are the problem, but the source of energy that we're using is the actual problem. And we don't have that stable base of renewable energy. We're working toward it right now. I think you are as well, with wind energy, solar energy, possibly nuclear energy as well. But we really need to get that sorted out. I was going to switch gears a little bit, Adam, if that's fine with you.
Please, yeah. Let's roll with this.
Yeah, so I think one of the main issues that people want to take away from this discussion is climate change in general. So
Mhm.
if you had one specific definition, just in general, I know you're not a climate scientist, as you
Yeah.
said, how would you tell people to define climate change, and how does it differ from all the other definitions that they've heard so far in their careers?
Meaning like climate change, global warming, like that, defining it in those terms.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, and also the climate crisis is another term that, it's all, I guess, global warming, climate change, climate crisis. And so global warming is the rise in the global average temperature. And so when people look at a snowstorm outside and they're like, oh, well, there's no global warming, right? That's something that we maybe have heard people say. So this is the if you take the average of the globe, like it's the average rise together. And so through the concentration of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, you can measure it's the ppm, the parts per million. Scientists every single day are measuring how much greenhouse gas is in the atmosphere. And I won't bore you with details there. It's staggering to see not just how quickly things have risen, and you can look at maps that literally go back hundreds of thousands of years to see how even with ice ages and everything, how things ebb and flow, those natural fluctuations, because there's natural fluctuations. But to see what's happened in the last couple decades here, it's skyrocketed, and it's over 2 times more than ever. It's pretty wild. So global warming is that rise in temperature. Climate change is the ripple effect of that warming temperature. And let's be honest, the only constant in life is change. Everything is always changing. Nature is always changing. We're always changing. But by forcibly putting so much greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, not by our own doing, we are forcing unnatural climate change to occur. And so the speed and the irregularity at which that's happening is called the climate crisis. And so since scientists are measuring this all the time, basically every couple years, the International Panel of Climate Change, I think that's what it stands for, the IPCC, it's basically hundreds of the world's best climate scientists from every country in the world. They release reports on the state of the planet, the direction we're headed in, and they essentially define tipping points around the temperature of the planet. And so as we reach key tipping points, what that means in terms of the ripple effects that happen in the planet. And so they've essentially defined 1.5 degrees as a critical tipping point, which they estimate at the rate at which we're releasing greenhouse gas into the atmosphere, and the way that also melts ice caps. And then there's methane, which is a greenhouse gas stored in those ice caps. And so it creates these feedback loops. So the more we release, the warmer things get, the more things melt, and the more gas then goes in, and things kind of accelerate. The climate crisis refers to these irreversible tipping points that no matter how much money, no matter how much caring we later choose to throw at the problem, once we pass these tipping points, that's, we can't repair that damage, especially in the time frame that we would like to. Is that helpful in terms of those definitions, or were there other terms that you guys hear thrown around that would be helpful to define? And by the way, that's kind of my working definitions of these. I consider myself a translator in a lot of ways, me trying to learn from call it the science, and try to translate into ways that, my friends and grandparents and stuff can understand. So it's a work in progress trying to package that down. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think those definitions are definitely very good for, people like us to understand, people who don't quite understand climate change to understand. And as you said, that you translate from science language, I would say, into what people can understand. I think I really like that point about how snowstorms, people might not think that those are as a result of climate change, but in the past week, as we saw in Texas, a giant snowstorm swept it. And that was a result of climate change. And I guess that could in itself raise awareness for it. But yeah, I guess that's probably
it's
important to mention too.
And it's it's a sad thing too that, one ripple effect that ends up happening is we have a lot more extreme weather events, call it hot, cold, hurricane, whatever it may be, extreme weather events. And the regularity, those are going to happen. But the regularity at which those are happening, we see big hurricanes after big hurricanes, or, what could be a little fire turns into a huge fire because of how dry everything's getting the heat. So it's a very sad thing, because a lot of people lose lives, there's so much disruption of life and so much hurt that comes from this. And then you also have, that's the wake up call for a lot of people, which is unfortunate that, that pain ends up waking people up. And, in general, though, I'll use a word that's called a very fluffy word, the word love. I was woken up to the climate crisis with fear. For me, I'm watching this video of Greta speaking about the state of the planet, and I hear 1.5 degrees, 10 years, irreversible chain reaction. And it puts me into this fight or flight response where, for me, I foresaw what it would do to, cities that I love and people that I love. They have to move to different states. They have to move to different cities. There's already, millions of people that are having to move to different countries because of the climate crisis and what it's doing to where they live and the ability for them to live there and sustain life there. And so I foresaw all that heartache. And, we're, related to Onora and what we're doing with Onora now. The first year of building Onora, we're kind of trying to wake everyone up and kind of shake everyone to shake them up, and be like, this is what's going on, do something. And we launched a private beta to get feedback from people on this, how they received it. And one of the big pieces of feedback that we got is, you're definitely leading with fear. You're going to wake some people up, but you're certainly leading with fear. And through a lot of conversation, realized the power of leading with love and helping people focus on the positive and their ability to actually create massive positive change. Because, part of my journey, I came from this very fearful state of climate change, and now I've shifted into this insanely optimistic, realistic, I would call it grounded optimism. Like, I'm not blind to the challenges ahead, but I am also so insanely optimistic about what's possible because I see the pathways of possibility, and the ability for people like you and me to help create that change. So it's, I think, important to note that we see these horrific events happening and they put us into this fight or flight response, a state of the world is that, to just use that phrase, like we have this feeling like the world is ending, this catastrophe, which is true. There's massive catastrophe happening left and right in a lot of ways. But how we move forward, I don't think that we can solve this problem by leading with fear. I think we can get some short-term action, but I don't think that we can actually solve a problem, this disconnection problem. We can't truly solve our disconnection problem and the systems that contribute to that by leading with fear.
I completely agree with that. I think that when people are scared of something, they tend to kind of go away from it and ignore it sometimes, or it causes them to like panic and think, oh no, there's nothing we can do. Mm-hmm. But thinking of it optimistically gives people more hope, and it kind of inspires them to do what they need to help the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and along with that, with that attacking with fear mentality, that could also cause along with fight or flight, it could also cause like a freeze response in many, causing them to stay solidified in their opinion because they feel attacked. I've seen some of my friends in school and in the community sometimes do that. If they have that mindset, they feel like that all these people are talking about climate change, they're just going to freeze and stay with their opinion. So I think going at it with love, as Adam said, is definitely important.
And I'll add a caveat to this too. People are speaking their truth, right? When someone's speaking their truth, and if they're angry, and that is, if you're speaking your truth and you need to share that message, and someone's going to hear that message and they need to hear it. Like, I heard the message from Greta and I needed to hear that, right? And it's led to this windy journey, but I needed to hear what I needed to hear. And so, it's something that we think about a lot with Onora too, because part of the way Onora works is we help you become aware of your connection to the planet, and we start to raise that consciousness by having you take an assessment to learn about your lifestyle and calculate your greenhouse gas emissions. And we call this your unintended harm, your unintended impact, because it's not like you're walking around saying, oh, I want to do this. I want, right? It's, we happen to be born in this society that makes and provides the things that we use in a certain way. And so now it's about, let's confront the brutal reality of the situation. And now let's be more mindful moving forward about that. And then how can we help shift the levers of society that need to shift so that we can live our lives in a way that creates good by default, not unintended harm. And so I don't mean to, be all butterflies and unicorns and say it's all good all the time. It's no, like there's some very serious things happening and we need to be real about that. But at the same time, the path forward, we need to wake up, whatever it takes for us to wake up, but then shift towards this heightened awareness of our connection to one another and the planet. Because in my opinion, that's, otherwise we're going to maintain this cycle of us versus them, people tuning out because it's not their issue, right? Like I used to feel this way where climate change was either your thing or it's not. You're a climate change person or you're not. And what I've learned is that, for the most part, everyone has good intentions. They just don't know.
Yeah, I love the way you put it there, Adam, with the grounded optimism. I think that's really the way we need to attack the climate crisis from an attention standpoint of getting people to know what it is. And what you're doing with Onora is great, getting people to realize what their true impact on the earth and the climate is. So you mentioned there was unintended harm. Everyone has unintended harm on the climate. So through your study at Onora and through your findings, what have been some of the biggest contributors to that unintended harm throughout all people, throughout our everyday lives? What have been some of the biggest factors that play a role in causing greenhouse gas emissions that everyone does?
Meaning from our personal
Exactly.
daily lives?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to answer that and bring me back to it if I don't. I want to add one caveat, which is just around this concept of our personal impact, and just provide some context around why nowadays we're actually even having the conversation of me and my impact. That was, and I forget, was it the 80s or whenever, but that was actually a marketing ploy by some of the big oil companies. I forget, maybe it'd been one of them, I forget the name, to actually help people feel like it's their thing, to have them think of, oh, this is your carbon footprint, this is you. And that helped kind of shift the narrative away from the responsibility for the people that decide how the things that we're going to use in our lives. Because if I'm going to get food, I'm going to get it. There's my options to get it. Or if I'm going to turn on the lights, until, yes, renewable energy is becoming more available these days, but if I'm going to use my lights, right, they're going to get turned on a certain way. Or if I'm going to buy a certain product, it's going to be designed in a certain way. So, yes, being more mindful of my personal impact is critical, but also helping ensure that we're all doing our part. Individuals, organizations, governments, we all have a role to play. And so I don't want to throw the blame solely on individuals, but at the end of the day, everyone is a person. I don't care if you're a CEO or a president, it doesn't matter if you're a student, if you're whatever. At the end of the day, we're all people. It doesn't care what fancy title you have. So we're all making decisions every day about what ripple effects we're going to have in the world. And so trying to create positive ripple effects in, every interaction, everything we say and do in our lives is going to create ripple effects. So how can we more intentionally create positive ripples? And so, in terms of from a me and you standpoint, the things that we can do today, there's the big categories. There's food, waste, energy, travel, and shopping. Those are the biggies. And maybe I'll just touch on call it the bigger eye-opening pieces for me that might be eye-opening for others as well. When it comes to food, fact that I was unaware of is that the production of one hamburger creates about as much greenhouse gas as driving 200 miles in a car. So if you just switch from chicken, from, not saying like if you don't want to eat meat at all, like if switching just to chicken instead of beef, you're going to save 6 times the amount of greenhouse gas just by making that switch. And obviously there's nuances between, how it's grown and if it's grown regenerative farm. And there's all these nuances that change that. But for the most part, like traditional big agriculture, like that's a helpful rule of thumb from a food standpoint. So just by switching from beef to chicken, you're going to save 6 times the amount of greenhouse gas. The second, like, and bigger than that, I would say is flying. Someone asked about COVID, a big impact from a personal standpoint. One flight is, you basically take one less flight. It's like going vegetarian for a whole year or something like that. Like it's the amount of gas that gets burned to thrust. I mean, think about how much a plane weighs to literally thrust a plane into the air. So that takeoff releases a lot of greenhouse gas. And then you also are releasing it higher in the atmosphere too, which has additional warming effects. So from a tip standpoint and from that front, like, yeah, sometimes you're going to have to visit family, you're going to want to visit family, see the world, do your thing. What you can do is, drive and see the world if you can, instead of seeing, getting from A to B and it's just some transaction, right? We get back to the disconnection problem of that flight is just a means to an end to get me to where I want to go. Well, if you end up driving and see the world, see some people along the way and actually soak it in, that's an option. And I use for me personally, I use the 1 hour rule, where if the flight is 1 hour or less, I'll try to drive instead because the door-to-door travel time is pretty much the same. But then the other thing is direct flights. So if you're taking a direct flight instead of a layover flight, you're basically cutting the amount of flights you're taking in half to get from A to B. And you kind of save yourself from being that crazy person running through the airport to catch your connection. So double win. And then an energy standpoint, most people don't know this. Like I used to live in an apartment, and it wasn't realistic for me to go put solar panels on my house, right? For some people that's an option for them, but for people that don't have that ability, what you can do, there are providers and I can provide links to you, in show notes here. But like Clean Choice Energy is one of those. There's a number of different companies popping up that allow you to essentially easily switch your electrical bill without you changing anything on your end. And they'll source renewable energy for you, to power the grid. And then trash, the biggest is, and I'm just going to keep going here. So just, food is I did not know this, that any bit of food that goes in the trash basically just turns to greenhouse gas. And the reason behind that though is food is naturally designed to break down. Like we're all food, even people are food for somebody, right? Like food for the soil eventually. But food is naturally designed to break down into the soil and turn into food for the microorganisms, the plants. It's all the cycle of life, the carbon cycle here. And so when we throw food in the trash, it goes to, most people don't know this, it just goes to a giant big pile called a landfill, which is just trash on top of trash on top of trash. But because of that, oxygen can't get through there. It's like a big pile. And without the presence of oxygen there, the food rots and it releases methane, which is a greenhouse gas 20 times more potent than carbon dioxide for accelerating climate change. So the best thing you can do is finish all your food. But even, say food scraps, if you can compost your food, you're basically using that trash as a force for good and turning what would otherwise become a contributor to global warming, you're turning it into food that grows more trees, more plants, that feeds everyone. And then the last bit is just, is shopping. There's tips everywhere on shopping here and there. I'm not going to say like, oh, only buy what you need, right? Like that's pretty generic. A thing that was helpful for me to learn is around returns. When you buy things, when you return them, not only are you having to pay for more travel, more flights, whatever it takes to get that item back to return it, in some cases, if you've worn it, if there's anything going on with it, that might not just make it back into the circulation. That might end up just going into the trash or then going into like a resale market, which means more flights. So there's this whole chain reaction that takes place when you return things. So one tip is, from a shopping standpoint, buy to keep. And if you can, buy secondhand, or if instead of returning stuff, gift it to someone else, because it's your fault if you bought something and need to return it. Unless it's like broken, it's your fault for buying 5 things, planning to return 4 of them. So gift it to a friend or donate it. Anyway, I'll pause there. I realize I've been ranting for a bit, but those are the 5 categories and some tips along the way.
Yeah, no, definitely. Those definitely seem realistic things that we can do. And I think the important thing here is to advocate realistic changes that we make, because yeah, everybody can stop using plastic straws and plastic water bottles, but that'll make a difference a little bit. But I think these tips that you've just shared with us are more realistic in the sense that, people will be more inclined to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really helpful.
Do either of you, any of you, have this sense of, and I know we talked a little about this before things started, but that sense of like, great, these are realistic tips, but like, how much of a difference are they actually, like in the big scheme of things, like how much of a difference are they actually making? Like, is that something that you're wondering right now? Because I definitely wondered that too. And maybe we can address that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So I'll share it in 2 parts, because one is how those little things actually do matter, and then in kind of the bigger systems that it actually helps influence. And I'll actually use an example that we're baking into Onora here. We're creating a new version of Onora and trying to better tell this story about how the things that we do matter and how one person actually does make a difference. And so one of the ways that we're working on how to tell this story is the planting of 1 tree, and in particular, the planting of 1 mangrove tree. So, right, if you pick up 1 piece of trash from the beach, or if you eat chicken instead of beef for 1 meal, like how much of a difference are you actually making? And so I'll use the mangrove tree to explain it, the power of ripple effects, and how this one thing actually changes the world in more ways than we could literally ever see. So this 1 tree, as it grows, drops 3 to 5 seedlings. And again, this is planting 1 tree, drops 3 to 5 seedlings. And as they grow, drop 3 to 5 seedlings. So this 1 tree within a decade is starting this mini mangrove forest. And on top of that, 75% of tropical fish are born against mangrove roots. So planting this 1 tree is providing habitat to massive amounts of marine life. And on top of that, mangroves actually have this really cool, complex root structure, and they help dissipate wave energy. And what that means is that as hurricanes, as really extreme weather events come through, mangroves are actually starting to be seen as a national security measure to protect entire coastal cities from natural disaster. So the planting of this tree is literally helping protect entire cities of people. And on top of that, by planting this tree, you're having to pay someone to do that. And so paying that person is helping put food on the table for their family so that their kids can grow up and change the world alongside you. So like, there's this 1 tree, right? And you think like, oh, it's just that 1 thing, but it's actually rippling throughout the world in so many different ways. And you have no idea if that 1 tree allows that 1 kid of that 1 farmer, they end up being able to go to school and create whatever and change the world in their own way, right? Like, you just don't know. And so from a philosophy standpoint, knowing that the things that you're doing, and this is what we're trying to help create with Onora and kind of the customized, clear action steps that we have in our platform, is helping you focus on that positive. So instead of saying like, well, I'm going to do this to create less harm, like, we're not in a race to see who could hurt the planet the least, right? Like, we're trying to create as much positive change as possible. And so it's about maximizing the good, maximizing those positive ripples, because every ripple effect we create is changing the world. We just don't know fully how. And it's actually why Onora is called Onora. It's actually part of Greta's middle name, Eleonora, to kind of give credit where credit is due, because me and you would not have this conversation right now. Like, maybe we would, but we probably wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for her giving a speech to a group of people, it happening to be recorded on this technology that I happened to see halfway across the world, and it created all these ripple effects. And she could have never known that. Like, she could never know that her doing that one thing would lead to all these other ripples happening in the world. And that's kind of the point of Honora, is helping us realize the capacity we have to literally change the world one ripple effect at a time. Because, and to tie it to more tactical stuff here. So say like buying one product, right? Like, I'm going to buy product A versus product B. Well, right now, the ripple effects that we as a society are held to is there's a certain standard that companies have to have in order to, be a business, right? It's basically follow the laws and don't lose money, like make money and follow the laws. That's it. And over time, we've raised that standard for what all businesses must adhere to. And so right now you have some businesses that are choosing to play by a different set of rules. And there's actually a special class of companies that are doing this called public benefit corporations, or B Corps. And they've legally, voluntarily decided that people, planet, and profit matter. It's a triple bottom line. It's not just about making money. And so by you buying a product A versus product B, you're voting with your dollar and helping that better company who's already voluntarily, because they're playing by different rules. So inherently, it's going to be more challenging for them, right? And so you're helping them grow their market share. And as they grow their market share, they get more influence in the industry, because the other people that are playing by different rules, that is just the make the money rules, well, now they see, oh, I can make more money because this other company is now making more money. So now they start to try to upgrade the way they're doing things to keep up with them so that they can call it win. And then that better company that you've chosen to buy from, as they grow more market share, they actually also get more influence when it comes to lobbying and it comes to influencing, call it the standards that every company has to go to. So buying that one product, and as we amplify that through a community of people and that the power of kind of collective action, we end up really evolving the systems of society in more ways than we really know. And what we end up doing is raising that standard for the type of world that we live in, which is what I hope to be a world where people and planet matter, right? Like, me and you are not a means to an end. Everything that you experience in your life matters, and you feeling, nothing short of amazing and whole and enough in your life matters. And whether you are a person, every person wants to feel that way. And whether you are an animal or, like, we're all part of nature, like, everyone wants to feel that way. And so it's a pretty powerful thing to wrap your head around, that our ripple effects matter. And at the end of the day, if there's a thing that I hope that we can instill with Honora, that I hope that we can learn a way to teach and transcribe this message is, I can't give you a list of do 1,000 things and this is how we change the world. At the end of the day, the only thing I can say to you is that lead with love and your ripple effects matter. How can you, and try to intentionally create positive ripples today? Like, it doesn't matter what you're going to do. Doesn't matter if you're going to buy a product, text a friend, make a decision at work, write legislation. Like, it doesn't matter what you do in your sphere of life, trying to create positive ripples and whatever that means. And trying to do that, like, we end up living in a more beautiful world than I could ever paint and describe to you. And, I get really excited talking about it. And yeah, it's, I'm glad that we've had this chance to talk about it too. And because it's a learning process of how we kind of teach and instill this message. Because I think it's critical that we do that.
Yeah, and that point you made about taking collective action is really powerful, because, as you said, planting one mangrove tree leads to all these different ripple effects. And, to think of, what if, like, a whole community planted mangrove trees, or a whole community, ate all their food at lunch, as you said, or made the proper decisions in shopping, those ripple effects would be magnified. And I think that's a really important takeaway.
Yeah, for sure. I really, again, emphasizing what Shari said, I really liked what you said about these ripple effects and what we can do ourselves. I had another question, Adam. Forgive me for asking so many questions.
No, I love questions.
Sure thing. So this is more of more of a broad spectrum thing. I'm not going to ask you to testify on the policy itself, but I know a lot of people have been discussing about legislative action for climate change, or a Green New Deal, as we call it here in the US. And that's, you said Greta Thunberg is one of your main forms of inspiration. She's advocated a lot of times to many world leaders to do something about climate change, to put some measures forth.
Yeah.
This isn't a question about the Green New Deal itself, but what would you say to the people who say that, climate change is an issue and we got to do something about it? I can do these ripple effects, but big government action, I think it's too radical, too expensive. I'm not sure if it's worth it. What would you say to those people? How can we spread our message around that despite creating ripple effects, there possibly needs to be something more to avoid getting to that point of no return before we inevitably can't solve this issue?
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you asked that. I am a big believer in legislation being a key component of needing to do this. There is a point in time in the US where slavery was technically legal, where women were not allowed to vote, where child labor was technically legal. And it gets to a point where enough people say that that's not okay. And it gets to and I think we're well past the point, but we need to get there now, yesterday, that we need legislation to now say, hey, the ripple effects we're having are not worth it. Because, we've seen this with COVID where, it's not this existential threat of, the climate crisis. We have COVID in our face and we see the way that the world responds to this. And we learn the role that economics plays in decision-making for governments. Because at the end of the day, a government's a business, right? You're feeding a country, you're supplying a country, and there's this sense that you as a country need to win, right? That's the mindset of countries these days. But at its core, anyway, from a, I was losing my train of thought there, but from a legislation standpoint, we need to, I know where I was going with this. From the economics, you realize the role that money plays in this, right? The business of government is often looking at, is it worth it, right? Is doing X worth it? So is banning slavery worth it, right? Because there's all this economic output, or is child labor worth it? And what we need to get to is a point where we say that every person matters, and that you matter, and that you are not a means to an end, some transaction to get me what I want, and that you're just, you at the end of the day matter. And we need to get to that point and recognize through legislation that the ripple effects that we're having now are not worth it, right? And what it can mean a lot of things, but in most cases, it means the economic output of what's going on right now. That gets back to the disconnection problem, is that we've become accustomed to this society, this way of living, that we can press a button, get what we want when we want it, as long as we can pay the price. But we become unaware of what it actually takes to get us those things. And the more disconnected we become from that, the more people and governments can get away with some pretty horrible things to get us what we want. And we are unaware of those ripple effects that we are signing off on as we do that. So a key part of, yes, this legislation component is addressing our disconnection problem, because the more deeply connected we become to the things that we use and enjoy in our lives, well, we're going to have to face the reality of, wow, it's uncomfortable to realize that by me buying my food from this farm, for example, well, they've actually been spraying crazy amounts of pesticides that have been killing the soil, that are leaving us with unfarmable land, and leaves a pretty bleak outlook for our agriculture future, right? Or the way that people are treated along the way. So by addressing the connection issue, it will help with the legislation issue, because, I get back to it. You mentioned, people say, is it worth it, right? Like, is all this money worth it? Is all this worth it? At the end of the day, we're all people. And from a evolution standpoint, to get pretty heady here. From an evolution standpoint, Homo sapiens, humans, our, call it gift, is our consciousness, our ability to think. And there's a really cool book on this called Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. And so us as humans, our ability to be conscious and heighten that consciousness. And so the more conscious we become of our deeply connected just life, will help address many of these things, including the roadblocks when it comes to legislation, I think. So yeah, that's thoughts on that, but definitely open for more questions and follow-ups here.
Yeah, so you mentioned how that doing your part creates these ripples, and I think spreading that message is very important to, you know, continue to raise awareness and continue to go against those false opinions that people have. So if there's one statement that you would like to, you know, broadcast, what would that be?
That's a great question. I think about that a lot. There's a podcast I like where they say, if you have one message to put on a billboard that billions of people would see, what would it be? I think it's on Tim Ferriss. The message that I would say, it's either, you know, positive ripples. I think lead with love. I'd like to say lead with love, but I think that's a little too fluffy for people. But try to create positive ripples today. Whatever you're doing, try to create positive ripples today. So, and as a thank you to all of you, you guys put so much wind in my sails, help me, you know, you see me getting excited here. You've kind of learned my light, the thing that lights me up inside. So I want to thank you for that, because I have no idea where things are going to go from this conversation, but you guys have helped me feel more of that excitement light in my life. And so thank you for the positive ripples you guys have created through this, just at least in my life. And I know there's so many cool things that'll come from this conversation, but just from me, thank you for inviting me here and making this happen.
Adam, this was amazing, because we knew, I mean, people get, as Serena also mentioned, that people have the fear and they want to ignore certain subjects to talk about. But if you give them clear guidance on, okay, how can we take little steps to getting things better, that will make them feel better. And also they will move forward in doing more and more of those to, you know, make a positive change. And some of the key points that you gave, the 5 key points that you gave for the public, I think that's useful, because they know now like what needs to be done. Is there a question for you? Is there a platform where people can check this information? Okay, if I switch from beef to chicken, this is what's going to happen. And if there is a list of things where people can go back to this platform and see and feel good about, like how you have Fitbit, is there anything to track the, you know, carbon footprint?
Yes. So that's actually what we've built with Onora. So if you go to onoraglobal.com, that's ONORA global.com. That's what we've built to make it as easy as possible for you to do your part, see your impact in changing the world. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants to do something, but it's not knowing what you can actually do is the hard part, and feeling like you can actually make a difference. So I'm excited. You know, this right now is, we're in February, and, you know, March, April here, we're going to have a new version of the platform built out that expands upon what we're currently doing, which is exciting. But yeah, check out Onora, and trying to help everyone do their part, because everyone's got good intentions. Just let's live them together. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, we would, keep an eye on all the changes that you're doing on the website, and hopefully we have an app somewhere where we can, you know, track all these things that we do every day. Not just recycling. There's so many things we can change ourselves to help the planet get better. I think this will be useful for our audiences and for the youth, to take that step for a better planet. With that, I would like to, do you guys have any questions in the group, in the team? All right, so with this, we would like to end this topic, and hope to bring you on board for more and more. This was so educative and informative, and hope to bring you on back, Adam, and to learn from you. And this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Likewise. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the day.
Thank you,
Bye.
Sarina, Shaurya, and Nipun. You guys were great. Now I would ask Arushi Pant, one of the directors, youth directors, to give a thank you note and then tell you all about the upcoming IAGB Youth event. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Adam, for coming to talk to us today about this really, really important topic. And thank you to all our youth speakers. Thanks to all our viewers for attending. And we hope that you've really been inspired to make those positive changes within your own lives and have your own ripple effects. So my name is Arushi, and I'm the director of the Youth Editorial. And so each month we have our Youth of the Month and our Art and Music Spotlight. And so we'd like to invite you all to submit nominations for these Youth Spotlights. And so anybody can submit the nominations, but the nominee has to be 25 years of age or under, and they'd have to have lived within the New England area. And so within the nomination, it would just be an email to iagbyouthnominations@gmail.com. And so that would include the name and the picture of the nominee, their school/university affiliation, and then a description of their accomplishments in about 250 words, specifically focusing on their impact on society, if applicable. And for the Art and Music Spotlight in particular, we'd also request that you send a picture of the art form and the student participating in it. So that could be a picture of them dancing or a picture of a painting that they've made, or whatever that may be. And for the Art and Music Spotlight, they can also submit a quote from the nominee on the personal significance of the art form to them. So that would all be put in an email and then sent to iagbnominations@gmail.com by the 10th of each month. And so if you would like to be considered for the March edition, then you would need to submit those by March 10th. And we're also taking submissions for articles written by youth members of the community, and it would be on a topic of their choosing, whatever they're passionate about. They can write an article that's about 300 words with a picture and then send that to, again, iagbnominations@gmail.com. And that can be anonymous, or there can be a name and a school or university affiliation sent with that as well. So those are all of the opportunities we have for submissions. And this month, in the February edition, we're coming out with a youth opportunities column. So be sure to take a look at that for a social impact entrepreneur fellowship and for a community engagement workshop. And we'll be sure to come out with more youth opportunities in the future. So do take a look at that. And so once again, I'd like to thank you all for coming today. We hope that you learned something and we hope that you've been inspired. So with that, we will end the youth talk. Thank you.
Thank you all.